Locally controlled police are essential to a free society. Ultimately, there are two types of police: locally controlled police, who serve the local citizens, and nationally controlled police, who serve the national government. Typically, a nationally controlled police never changes into a local police, but historically speaking, locally controlled police have become nationalized. This is something every American should be aware of, because signs of nationalization of our local police are all around us. In order for locally controlled police to become nationalized, 7 steps generally need to occur. First, a crisis is needed so the public and local police demand help. The attack of 9/11, the Boston bombing, and even the riots in Ferguson and Baltimore are events within the 21st century alone that have been used to promote the need for a national police force. Second, in response to the crisis, aid is accepted in the form of military assistance, federal funding, and grants. For decades, Congress and the executive branch have used certain programs to quietly transfer military equipment into the hands of the local police departments. This is why many are witnessing the more militarized look of police instead of the iconic boys in blue. For instance, since 1994, Congress has provided more than $14 billion in aid to the COPS Office, which is a component within the Department of Justice, in an effort to advance community policing. This includes grants awarded to more than 13,000 state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies to fund the hiring and redeployment of more than 126,000 police officers. Third, along with aid comes legislation. Since 9/11, America has allowed the passing of multiple bills in the name of security, such as the Patriot Act, authorizing things like warrantless searches and wiretaps, the Homeland Security Act, authorizing the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. Congress has also passed many bills providing funds to the DHS for assisting local police and firefighters with things like training, additional personnel, and buying emergency equipment. In response to the 2014 Ferguson riots, the Department of Justice initiated a program called the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. It provides a 3-year, $4.75 million grant to fund pilot programs in 6 cities for federal training of local police. In December of 2014, the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing was established, which imposes federal standards on state and local police. As you can see, the federal government is becoming more transparent in its attempts to nationalize our police. Fourth, propaganda is abundant during riots and demonstrations. History has proven that radical groups use propaganda to exploit and depict local law enforcement as brutal or racist. For decades, this strategy has discredited officers while advancing the campaign against local police. America has witnessed a steady stream of police brutality charges, emanating from the riots of the 60s and 90s all the way to the latest riots in 2015. The latest claims of police brutality were made by the same radical socialist and communist groups, as well as by some new George Soros-spawned groups. With the use of demonstrations and marches, these groups have attempted to discredit the police with charges of police brutality, then have proceeded to disseminate their message of police brutality throughout a broad range of media outlets. This negative campaign has influenced the public's perception of police. Fifth is indoctrination. For decades, the federal government has been training local police about crises. This federal training has 2 main goals. Number 1, to train local police how to use equipment and tactics from the federal government. One example is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is part of the DHS. They provide a wide array of basic and advanced training to state, local, tribal, international, and federal law enforcement officers all across the country. Some of the police training is so militarized that local officers are trained to think like soldiers. Number 2, federal information is used to indoctrinate local police about those labeled as extremists or domestic threats. This has been done through the DHS and its fusion centers. These centers share information from the federal level all the way down to the local level governments. An example is a DHS report given to local law enforcement personnel warning that disgruntled military veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan wars could join extremist groups. The report went on to say, right-wing extremism in the United States can be broadly divided into those groups, movements, and adherents that are primarily hate-oriented, and those that are mainly anti-government, rejecting federal authority in favor of state or local authority, or rejecting government authority entirely. It may include groups and individuals that are dedicated to a single issue, such as opposition to abortion or immigration. So would you label these individuals as extremists or a domestic threat? Sixth, we then see implementation. With gradual implementation of these steps, local police, for all practical purposes, become an arm of a national police force beholden not to the people, but to the national government. Meanwhile, Americans believe the federal government is fixing the problem. For instance, the reaction to the 2014 Ferguson riots was the creation of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. A few months later, the President stated,
"We have a great opportunity coming out of some great conflict and tragedy to really transform how we think about community law enforcement relations."
He also referred to the task force's recommendations as
pragmatic, common sense ideas.
When the final report went public, it revealed specific recommendations for federal management of local police. Things such as national policing practices, national benchmarks, federal technical assistance and funding of local police forces, and working with the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that community policing tactics in state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies are incorporated into their role in Homeland Security. So, with little news coverage or public backlash in response to the report, one can see the conditioning of America is becoming very real. Finally, seventh is nationalization. At this point, a true national police force becomes a reality. Local police departments assimilate into a national police force which takes full charge of the responsibilities and duties of previously local and state-controlled law enforcement agencies. Now, as you well know, we are not at this stage yet. However, with the initiatives being promoted by the federal government, many should be alarmed. We as citizens need to realize what the executive branch is attempting. It is an obvious move to gain federal control of local police forces. We need to remember, law enforcement should be a local, not a federal function. Regardless of what is happening, in the end, the Constitution does not authorize a president's national standards for police or the taxpayer-funded bribes being used to impose them nationwide. That means what the federal government is doing regarding policing is unconstitutional. Police departments should be responsible to the local communities that fund them and to those they are supposed to serve. If we want to maintain our freedom, we need to support our local police and keep them independent. Get involved in your local area and make sure your state and local governments work for you.